This is Food for Thought with Deborah Walker. Today on Food for Thought, I'm interviewing Margaret Cahill, who was diagnosed with Mantle Cell Lymphoma in 2012, which is one of the fastest growing types of cancers linked with pesticides, interestingly enough. She's known as the Wessex astrologer, for those of you who might be following her on Facebook and on her blog. Margaret resorted to writing that blog to keep in touch with her friends and unwittingly has ended up writing about the good, the bad and the ugly side of cancer. Thanks, Margaret, for joining me today.
Oh, thank you. It's nice to be here.
So, Margaret, the first question I have of you is, how are you today and where exactly in your health journey are you?
I'm feeling very well. I'm in full remission and I'm just trying to get fit and stay fit and eat properly, really, which is sometimes a bit of a challenge. But I think, one side of it is you can't exactly be a saint. And I think you come out of cancer with a whole load of hopes that you're going to suddenly transform your lifestyle and become, a vegan yogi living on a mountainside. And of course, it's not possible. So, that's where I am.
That's a shame. I really did think you were going to tell me you were a yogini.
Wish.
Don't we all at the end of the day? So what actually drove you to write the blog and share the details of this, what is quite a personal journey?
Yeah, it was quite strange, really. I think when you're first diagnosed, everything happens very quickly, and the people who obviously really care about you realise something very big is happening, so they're all wanting to be kept up to date. And Stephen, my partner, and I were just spending every evening phoning or texting or emailing or Skyping people, and apart from it being really tiring, it was very depressing, and we just didn't want to talk about the C word anymore. And one of my authors actually said, well, why don't you write a blog? And because I'm a publisher, I just knew, what I do is edit other people's work and publish books. I don't write. But it really was the only way to do it. And once I'd done the first blog, suddenly it was so liberating that I really got into the swing of it. And I found that I was building whole scenarios around really silly things that happened, like the dash across two counties, in a radioactive state for the scan and everything like that. And it sort of grew from there, and it really helped me, and it also really helped people to find out what was happening without having to talk to me, because as treatment went on, obviously I was too tired or too ill, or I had to kind of conserve my own strength.
Yes, I found your blog very candid, particularly about being, talking about being booked on radio, for instance, for the radio interviews. That's how incredibly candid you were. As I was going through your blog, I thought, wow, fascinating. And you say the marketing machine swung into action, and all of a sudden I found myself being booked for radio interviews, which was initially a very scary thought. Writing is one thing, but talking about it all, that's a very different thing. And I said yes to everything on the basis I would eventually get used to speaking on radio and being interviewed. But deep down, I still find it hard to believe that people want to read about my experience, let alone listen to an interview with me. Margaret, why do you think people are interested in reading and now listening about your particular experience?
I have no idea. I mean, the feedback I get is that even people who haven't got any connection with cancer seem to get something out of it. I think it's, apart from sharing the cancer journey, it's sharing a spiritual journey, and we're all on some kind of spiritual journey, whether we acknowledge it or not. And perhaps it's that rings true for people, that this was a struggle as much with myself as with my body and my health. And I think people could relate to that. Maybe that's what the actual thing deep down is.
Do you think it was also about the fact that you were so candid?
Yeah, actually, because there were people who we got into conversations in the weirdest places, and they actually appreciated the chance to talk to somebody who would just tell it like it is, because people don't know how to talk to someone who has been diagnosed with cancer. I've had people say, I just don't know what to say to you. And it's like when somebody's bereaved, you don't know what to say to them. And I think somehow just talking about everything as it happened in a very open way unlocked an awful lot of things for people, and the readers on the blog were saying that they were grateful because now they knew how to talk to their loved ones or friends or whatever. So it's just the way it came out, I think.
Well, I think it's a really interesting point about the fact that people don't know how to talk to people who are going through grief and you know, have had some form of link with death. Because I know I used to meet somebody to walk my dog, and I was the only person who ever talked about his wife dying suddenly, because I'd ask him how was he feeling, and he would say to me that I was the only person who ever asked and actually really truly wanted to know about where he was on his own journey out of that. I think it is very difficult.
It is, because also, you know, cancer has got such a bad reputation.
Yes.
You know, it's like you're kind of worried to say, how do you feel, when what you really want to say is, well, you know, what's the prognosis? And of course, you just hear the C word and you think, oh, that's it. Everybody dies who has cancer, because it's so fearsome and so scary. And everybody knows it's the big thing that's being fought these days. And I think that's probably the subtext, that people might not want to say, how are you? Because they don't actually know how to deal with the fact that you might die from it.
But actually, you found on your own journey that wasn't the case always, because you discovered the person who wrote Radical Remission, didn't you?
Oh, God, yeah. What a fabulous book.
Do you want to tell me about your experience of finding out about that?
Yeah, gosh, I'm just trying to think how I discovered it. I think I happened to see an interview on Facebook that was a link to YouTube, and it was an interview with the doctor, and I just thought, this is absolutely amazing what she's doing, because she's looking into 1,000 cases of people who had what was called a spontaneous remission from cancer. And as a research scientist, she was really interested in knowing what had happened to them, because those are the people that fall through the net as far as cancer statistics are concerned, because they don't want to know about people who've survived who haven't had chemo or radiotherapy. And when I started reading it, I just thought, this is absolutely amazing, because she found, I think it was the 7 key factors that were common with all the people who had survived cancer, and they all had really nasty diagnoses, terminal cancer, and she found that there was I think it was 7 key things. You know, high up was having a spiritual life and making a dramatic change to your life and having a positive outlook, and researching, you know, the best things to eat. And her case histories were so beautifully written, and she'd obviously felt like she'd opened some amazing Pandora's box and thought, this is absolutely incredible. You know, that these people are surviving and they've found a way to change their lives against all odds. And I actually recommend it to everybody that I come into contact with. I pull the pants off them, because I just think it's absolutely incredible.
Well, you're right, though, that actually these statistics do fall through the net, because actually when you do get a spontaneous remission or a miracle happen, it is very much seen that, well, the results must have been wrong. The diagnosis must have been wrong. Therefore, you didn't have it. And it's just ignored from that moment onwards.
And it's so frustrating. I mean, the whole issue of using alternative therapies is obviously a very hot potato, because so much money is invested in chemotherapy. And I was in a really peculiar position, because the cancer that I had a very high proliferation rate, and it was kind of non-negotiable in a way, because it was made very clear to me that my chances of survival would be pretty bad if I didn't have chemo. And it was so fast growing that I didn't even have time to think. So I started the whole process of chemo really on one foot. I just did it. I just got involved in it. And it was only after really a couple of cycles that I think my mind caught up with what was happening to my body, and I started thinking, I'm not very happy about this. And sort of really, with the help of some friends, really got involved in, you know, the other things that I could be using. And that's when you find that you might be slightly in conflict with your medical advisors, although I was incredibly lucky.
So the issue of alternative therapies you brought up a lot in your blog, and in particular the fact that the nurses were actually quite interested, weren't they?
Oh yeah, I mean, especially once I got into isolation for the stem cell transplant, it was really brilliant then, because I had my own little fridge, and my partner,
as you do.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I had to have that. And Stephen would bring in all kinds of juices, whichever I happened to feel I could tolerate. But also I had everything lined up. So I had my vitamin A drops, my vitamin D3 drops, my wheatgrass protein, the aloe vera, countless other things that I was using. And they, if they came in when I was taking them, they would just ask. And especially with the vitamin A, I mean, that was the thing which really set them all on fire, because I was the only person on the ward who wasn't on a morphine drip to counteract the pain of ulcerated GI tract, because I didn't have a single ulcer ever.
And effective. Do you want to just outline some of the key things you specifically did, the alternative aspects of your treatment for those who might be listening, and ones that in particular you definitely found helped?
Yes, I mean, I think the best advice I was given was by Swamiji, who is a very dear friend. And before I went in, I was very concerned about, I started reading up, and I said, well, should I be taking this and should I be taking that? And it's all going to be terrible and I'm going to be sick. And she said, look, just have the first cycle and just listen to what your body tells you. And I think I wrote a very emotional blog when I came out that time, because I wrote about my body screaming or howling or something. And the first thing that happened, of course, was that my taste started to change. And within a day of having chemo, I had a disgusting taste in my mouth, and it just felt absolutely awful. So she said, okay, so vitamin A, because that prevents mucositis. Now, I know that taking too much vitamin A is in the press at the moment. But when you're in that kind of situation, I think it's important to take the things that your body's asking for. And it quite clearly needed something to counteract the effects of the chemo. So I took 1 drop of vitamin A a day, and I took that for probably about 8 months, actually. Just 1 drop a day in the morning. And that's what absolutely definitely stopped my mouth being affected at all. My taste still changed, but my ability to eat, and I didn't have ulcers, which they found so hard to believe on the isolation ward. I also took vitamin D3, because that helps to boost the immune system. And you need to keep your immune system strong so it can counteract the effects of the toxicity of the chemo. It's all about keeping your body strong and helping it to clear the toxins, because you get a huge toxic overload from the chemo. So that was the thinking behind those. Wheatgrass protein is very good, because it's got very, very high levels of protein, plant-based protein in it. So as your appetite gradually deteriorates, obviously you have to, that's the danger point, when you can get something called, I think it's cachexia, where your body isn't absorbing food and you're losing weight and you're not hungry, and so you're literally starving to death. And that's something that can happen. And I was obviously really worried about that, because I knew I was having incredibly aggressive chemotherapy. I also used aloe vera. You can get a really nice organic aloe vera, which just uses the inner juice of the plant, so it's not bitter. And I would take 2 tablespoonfuls of that every morning, because it helped to calm my GI tract.
And in particular, was there any specific therapies you use, like reflexology or anything, that you found that were really beneficial for you?
I was having distance healing from a whole load of lovely people who that was really weird, who wanted to, they asked if they could tune in at a certain time. It was 9:00 at night, and I tried to set aside a few minutes at 9:00 so that I could just be quiet. And when I first did it, it was absolutely incredible. It was just like being drawn into the jet stream or something. It was like I'd go into meditation, and suddenly it was like, and I could feel the power of it, which was incredible. I think this is where I really sort of discovered mindfulness, which I found an incredibly powerful technique, and I'm investigating it a lot more now. Because in the dark of the night, when you're just feeling awful and maybe you can't sleep and you're so worried, you have to find a way of coping with your thoughts. And everybody tells you it's so important to be positive and you've got to think about your surviving, you've got to fight the cancer cells and all that. And it's impossible. In the middle of the night, dark nights of the soul and that stuff, you just feel very alone. And so I found that really good. I had reflexology when I was in isolation, and that was really lovely. Yeah.
Now you talk about in the dark of the night. Is that the reason the name of the book?
No, that was funny actually, because it's called Mantle Cell Lymphoma. Judy Hall, who features very strongly in the book, she was incredible. She said, that's a really interesting name. The first thing she said was, well, why you? When I told her, she was so shocked, and she said, what? Why you? I can't imagine why you've got cancer. Because I was living a reasonably healthy lifestyle and was keeping fit. And then she said, that's a really interesting name, Mantle. That usually covers up something. And it just came into my head, Under Cover of Darkness. Yeah, the book very nearly got called Always a Silver Lining, because I finished quite a lot of the blogs when it's been especially sort of dark and horrible, but something good has happened. And I've said there's something good that's happened, and I've said, see, always a silver lining. So I nearly called it that, but that was a bit too sort of mind, body, spirity, a bit too sort of, the skies are blue, the sun is shining kind of thing, which I'm not at all that kind of person.
Yeah. Now, you wonder in your blog about how many of our illnesses are actually caused because we're not nourished or sustained at a deep level by either our lifestyles or our food, etc. Did you ever come to a conclusion about that for yourself?
No. I think it's a very complex issue, and I think it involves lots of levels. For me, I'm trying to focus on areas where I'm feeling nourished or not nourished, spiritually and emotionally and physically. And it changes on a daily basis. I think that you can have a really good day at work and come home and be absolutely buzzing. And then possibly the next day, a few things happen that really deplete you and make you feel like all the insecurities come up. And all you can do is work on whatever happens to be uppermost on that day. Likewise, with eating, I mean, we do our best. Certainly we buy organic food, and when we eat out, we sort of try to eat the best kind of food we can. I try not to eat processed food. We don't really have takeaways. I think that's ongoing. You've always got to be on your guard, and I'm incredibly anti-GMO food and anything that isn't, what it says on the label, basically. I read labels the whole time. I'm so bored. Honestly, I read books and labels.
Supermarket visits are always fun, I find.
I know, and I'm quite loud about it as well. In fact, I was talking to a friend this morning, one of the ones in the book, actually, Lynn. She was the one who was very ill right at the beginning. She's a very dear friend, and she's just finished reading the book. And although she knew me through all of it, she said, reading the book has sort of made her really, really appreciate where I'm at with food. Yeah. And she was in the supermarket this morning, and she picked up something which was purportedly a healthy packet of biscuits. And she was reading the label because she'd read my book. And she said out loud, "It's got 40% sugar in it. This isn't a healthy biscuit." And there was a woman standing next to her, and she looked at her and said, "Really?" She said, "Yes, I'm not buying that." And this other woman said, "I'm not buying it either." And I said, "Yes, brilliant. More of that." Yeah, I'm quite loud about things like that. I'll say, "Oh my goodness, look at all that filling."
I absolutely agree, though. Obviously, I'm a naturopathic nutritionist, so I'm completely with you there. I recently did a talk and showed that the healthy bars that you can now buy, these oat bars, were worse than if you picked a bar of chocolate, some of them.
Oh, I know.
Which was
They're
quite
awful.
scary. Yeah, absolutely. Now, just before I go off on a rant about food, join you there. Yeah, stand in a supermarket with you. Your blog is very unexpectedly funny at times. I wasn't expecting that, I have to say. So for me, it was quite unexpected. And particularly, you touched on the radioactivity aspect and travelling to another hospital because they couldn't actually deal with you on the day that they gave you the radioactivity to actually do the scan, could they? So you ended up. And I have to say, I laughed out loud on the plane when I read this. And the nurse says to you, get there as fast as you can and don't go near any babies or pregnant women because they could be harmed by your radioactivity. Which is actually, one, quite scary on one side of things, but also, how did you keep your sense of humour through this whole experience?
I just think it was the sense of how totally ridiculous the whole situation was. I think one of the amazing things about writing the blog was that once I'd started, I was almost storing up things. So I'd go through something like that, and as I was going through it, instead of getting angry or upset or whatever, I was thinking, they're never going to believe this. They are never in a million years going to believe this. You know, especially the bit about when I got lost coming out of Southampton. When I can get lost in a brown paper bag with instructions. So when I came out of the hospital, which, as I said in the blog, is different from when you go into the hospital. So I came out, and all of a sudden, I'm in the middle of Southampton, and I can't really get out and wander into a shop and ask. Well, I suppose I could have done. I mean, they wouldn't have known. I could have done, I suppose, but I thought I'd better not. So I'm driving along this road thinking, I've only got so long and I've got to get to this hospital. It's another 30 miles away. How am I going to find the way? So I called across the road to this postman. I kind of slowed down and he was on the other side. And I just bawled out, how do I get to the motorway from here? And he I was obviously like in a really deep rural area. No, not rural, a really deep, lots of houses. There were no businesses or anything. I'd got completely lost. And anyway, he got me on my way. And I was actually laughing because I was thinking about how I was going to write it. and like waiting how many pages of Gareth I read while I was waiting and things. And it actually became a story of my life, which helped me to survive. And that's why I'm actually doing a talk at Watkins in May. It's my first ever talk, but I've called it Blogging as a Spiritual Journey because I think that you can use this method of communicating your life to kind of help you understand it. It's like it was working itself out as I was blogging the experiences, if you know what I mean.
In many respects, you feel that it helped you actually not dwell on aspects, but actually because you were creating a story and you were very aware that other people would be reading this, that actually you were shifting your own state from potentially quite a negative one into a more positive one for the reader.
Yeah. Oh, yes. And I used to joke about sharing the misery around, like, why should it just be me? Apparently we're all in this together. I don't think so.
Suddenly the war on cancer became everybody.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you have to. And I think people were a bit confused about me in the ward. There was one particular time when I think I was going in for cycle 2 or 3. And I'd started off in this big 6-bed ward, which I was really pleased about because I kept ending up in one of the really cold isolation wards, which I hated. So I was in this ward, and at that stage I was feeling fine, and I made sure that I was always in my own clothes. Apart from when I was in isolation for 3 days when I felt so bad, all the rest of the time I always got up, got showered and got into my own clothes. And so because I looked okay, and assuming I wasn't actually dragging a drip around, I could almost have been one of the members of staff, like one of the voluntary people. And there was this lovely old lady in the bed opposite me, and her husband came in, and he was he was like a retired vicar type or something. And he was so funny because the nurses came and said, we've got to move your bed. And I said, oh, don't tell me, I'm going into ISO 2. And they said, yeah, sorry, really, but we need this bed. So I started getting up and getting my stuff together, and he looked over at me and he said, is that your bed? And I said, yes. And he said, have you got this awful thing then as well? And I said, yes. He said, really? And I said, yep. Sorry, I've got to go and push my bed now. I'll see you later. And he looked at me and kind of like, really don't understand that one. So it was just all storing up things, to kind of relay. And I really felt like I was sort of getting back to my readers and saying, so you'll never guess what happened on the way to the cancer ward type thing. Yeah, it's crazy.
And you do some really very funny moments with, I think her name's Dot.
Dot. She's going to be known all over the county.
Do you want to just explain who Dot is for the rest of the audience who probably don't know who we're now talking about?
Oh, she's absolutely lovely, but she's terrifying when you first meet her. She's very small and incredibly focused on her job. And she's the first person you come into contact with, really. She's on the ward from 7 a.m. until I think she finishes about 2. And her sole mission is to get absolutely everything done in her shift. And if the people who were on before her haven't done what they were supposed to have done, like the water round or whatever, she could get extremely sniffy. And if she was in a strop, everybody knew about it. She did all the teas, coffees, organised all the meals and everything. And when I first met her, I was actually a bit scared of her, as it shows in the first blog where I asked for coffee and I got the wrong thing back. And then I just knew that she was going to lay into me because she thought I'd asked for something else. But then I came to see a completely different side of her. And she's an absolute powerhouse. She zooms around the ward doing so many things. She remembers absolutely everything, and she champions every single patient. And the number of times I saw, I'd be maybe on the day ward having tests and injections and blood tests and whatnot, because it's very sort of frantic when you first get involved. And there was hardly a day when I wasn't either at or in the hospital. And she would remember everything that everybody was in for. And she was so excited one particular time because there's a lovely lady who also features in the book called Jean, who was just absolutely incredible. She was the first person I shared a ward with. And she had these awful stomach problems, and her consultant was trying all these different things that made her really ill and terrible side effects and things. And Dot was wandering around one day and she said to me, what, I think she's got diverticulitis. I'm sure she has. And I said, well, why don't you mention it to one of the doctors or one of the nurses, 2 days later, she got diagnosed with diverticulitis. I mean, you couldn't have nailed Dot's feet to the floor. She was so excited, because not only because she was right, but because it helped Jean. And all of a sudden, Jean was lots better because she was getting the right treatment. And even now, when I walk in, Dot just throws her arms around me. She got a copy of the book.
How lovely.
She's special. She's absolutely lovely.
No, I think you really highlight in the blog in particular how healing is a very different experience in the medical wards, but because they constantly woke you up and things like this, didn't they? Whereas in the alternative field, we'd very much want you to just continually rest. It's not so much like that, is it?
No, it's horrendous. And I mean, to outline this poor lady Jean, who was incredibly ill. And she was a very frail little thing, and she used to sit wrapped in her dressing gown during the day, and she never complained at all. And we had sort of many lovely, gentle chats, but she would be so obliging that if she'd finally managed to get back to sleep one day and a student nurse came in to wake her up to weigh her, I mean, how pointless is that? Why have the water jugs changed at 5 o'clock in the morning? Because you wake up, so you're woken up at 5 o'clock for the water jug change. You're woken up at 6 o'clock for blood pressure and oxygen checks. You're woken up at 7 o'clock for a cup of tea you don't want. And then at 8 o'clock you're given breakfast. And then at 9 o'clock it's ward rounds. So that's from 5 till 9, you can't rest. And then the morning is busy after ward rounds. They come round and they change your bed and they clean the floor and they clean the rest of the place. And then people come for various other tests. And it just goes on and on and on and on. And it's impossible. I mean, I was lucky when I was in isolation that one of the nurses early on realised that I am someone who needs a lot of sort of mental space. And she just got a piece of paper and put "Do Not Disturb." And every time I wanted to have peace and quiet, I just put it on the door. And it was because Judy used to come and give me healing.
Yeah.
And they were good. They appreciated it. They were kind of bound by hospital routine, but they did also, when I brought up that particular problem, the staff the staff nurse actually came and said, no, not the staff nurse, one of the head nurses came and said, I'm really sorry, we're actually going to change that. We're going to change the water round so it isn't done at 5 o'clock in the morning, because that's just wrong. You need to rest. So they do want to.
Yes. It's almost that the human element, the human understanding around healing is missing. It's all about, we have to get this much stuff done within our time that we've got, and therefore we're just going to put it all in scheduled, and everybody has to just live with that, and so the healing aspect just goes out the window.
It does. It's very much a case of giving you all the appropriate medicines at the correct time, and then coming back to check that you've taken them and you're going to have the next lot. And they have to do so many people, and there aren't enough nurses. That it has to be regimented. But I don't know. I was talking to Naomi, actually, who features in the book as well. She's one of my favourite nurses. So I gave her a copy of the book, and she said that she was going to change some of the ways that she did things based on, and she's a senior staff nurse, based on what I'd written, because I think quite possibly they don't realise.
Yeah.
And once you do tell them, because the nurses, they want you to feel better, and they want you to get well, and they want you to go home, and they are so lovely and so supportive. And when you tell them something so small to that, that's going on that is really upsetting you, they want to change it. They really, those nurses are so committed and so incredible. I'm absolutely full of awe for what they do, because they actually ask to go on the cancer ward. That's a very popular ward for people to go on, believe it or not.
Now, you talk about, and in the blog, about how once you knew you had an aggressive form of cancer, it changed the relevance of time for you, made you panic for every moment that it went untreated at first. Has time taken on a new meaning for you now?
Yes. I try to live much more in the present. I think the mindfulness practice has caused that. But I try very hard not to keep thinking about tomorrow and, what's going to happen in the future and everything, because you can't know what's going on at a molecular level in your body at any one time. I could be absolutely fine. I could be ill. I don't know. I'm going to live the best I can at each moment. And that's a work in progress. It's very difficult to do.
That's absolutely lovely. Do you think by accident you've created a cancer healing Bible for others to be inspired by?
Oh, that's a nice thought. If I have, it would be absolutely amazing, because I had so much support, and if I can help to spread that support, and so that other people don't feel so alone, that would be a totally brilliant outcome, really. Always a silver lining.
Under Cover of Darkness, How I Blogged My Way Through Mantle Cell Lymphoma is the book you've written. How do people get hold of a copy, Margaret?
It's available from any good bookshop, online through those lovely people like Amazon. It's available through any mail order, normal places where you buy books. People can also visit me at my, I'd love them to visit me at my blog, which is margaretcahill.wordpress.com. And there's actually a link on there that you can click on. You can buy it through my company, which is the Wessex Astrologer. There's also a link to buy the book through me. They can buy it from me if they want to. So, yes.
That's fabulous. Thank you very much, Margaret, for joining us today on Food for Thought and with Natural Health Radio.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks, Debbie.